Now we shine our spotlight on Dr. Parris Lyew-Ayee Jr., presenting an interview with Miss Elizabeth Chang of JIC.
Well, hello. Oh, Paris. It's good to be here talking with you. Um, Natural Hazards Atlas of Jamaica. Tell me the story. Why?
Well, Jamaica is no stranger to natural hazards. For the entire period, recorded history of Jamaica, we've been affected by hazards one way or another. You can go all the way back to 1692 earthquake, destruction of Port Royal, and the subsequent forming of Kingston as a result of that event in the 17th century. Going all the way to Gilbert Island, recent events of flooding and landslides all over the country. We're no strangers to it. But my co-author and I decided to put together a story in a visual story, something that is not a textbook, something that's fun to read, something that's easy to read, something easy to understand, by young and old alike, without dumbing down the content. Something that can appeal to anybody, anywhere in Jamaica, from the visual, the pretty pictures, to the maps, the graphs, and the tables that are in there. Quick information at a glance. Something that's very important, and we thought that this was timely to do something like this with Jamaica.
Okay, good stuff. I'm in the insurance industry, general insurance, and one of the challenges that we have with the conversation with customers is often, I've taken care of everything as it relates to a hurricane. And so I don't need to be concerned. What would you say to people like that if you were the person in that conversation? What's your advice to those persons?
The key thing is that a hurricane is just one of four main hazards that affect Jamaica. The others being earthquakes, others being floods and landslides. A hurricane is a wind event. It's not a rain event. So you have the secondary impacts from hurricane, the flooding and those types of events. So a hurricane isn't just the rain. And you can have flooding without a hurricane. You also, in Jamaica, we are very primed to understand the type of hurricane season. Now, floods, landslides, and earthquakes don't have seasons. So these are things that people need to be aware of beyond just looking at a single hazard and a single consequence and outcome of a hazard. We need to do more than that. We need to elevate the discussion more. We need to understand that these risks, flooding, landslides, earthquakes, don't disappear on December 1 and don't magically appear on June 1st. We need to have that. And the key thing with the general insurance industry is that there are many different dimensions to the industry itself. As you know, you have the claims issue that are very important as it relates to hazard impacts and so on. And of course, with that, you have the reinsurance providers in the reinsurance market. But the other thing that we also need to understand is the underwriting side of the insurance. You don't necessarily want to overinsure your property, especially since in Jamaica, home insurance is not required by law. So you need to make sure that you price your product properly, and that the product is appealing to your customers without running them away, and they just dismiss this as an unnecessary expense.
One of the sections that I particularly like in the book is the section about our protected areas. Tell me, why are these areas important, and how does ensuring that we keep them protected help us in terms of how, as a nation, we cope with natural hazards?
My co-author, Rafi Ahmad, my mentor, was very instrumental in framing the natural hazard discussion for me as a student. And when we began to put the discussion together, we realized we're not going to start off flying straight into the storm. We wanted to begin the discussion by talking about Jamaica as the physiographic landscape of Jamaica. Land of wood and water, all of that good stuff. We had to lay it out. This is where the hazards occur. This is where they play out. The people who are going to be affected by the hazards live on the same land that we're talking about. So protected areas is just one element of the natural, of the physical environment. God giveth and God taketh away. So the natural beauty that formed the areas that we've designated as protected areas. are still in the same environment and are still exposed to the same natural hazard conditions. Now, protected areas can either help or hurt the natural hazard outcome if you're not careful. So, for example, unless an area is designated as a protected area, a watershed area, you're going to be cutting down all these trees. These trees end up not protecting the soil wash into the rivers, create landslide condition, create downstream flooding condition, mud flows, and all those types of occurrences. You have mangroves and protected areas along the shoreline, which protect the shoreline against surges and other coastal flooding. You have many different elements. So when you're protecting an area, this is not just about the environment and here and now. It's about the bigger system in which the physical environment plays out. Yeah.
Good stuff. I am very interested in the flatbridge story. I noticed in your text you didn't really go too much about what surrounds flatbridge, and I'm sure you've heard some of the myths about all that happens out at flatbridge. What really is the explanation of the flatbridge story, or that entire area? What's the truth about out there?
And I'm sort of trying to frame what I imagine you to be saying against the book. The first section of the book is about the physical environment of Jamaica. The second section is about the hazards, the hurricane, earthquakes, landslides, and floods. And the third section is about specific parishes and specific areas within Jamaica. So we're not just talking about Jamaica. We're talking about something that could appeal to the Lucy resident, something that could appeal to the Mandeville resident, as opposed to them trying to figure out where Mandeville is on the map. In your case, Flatbridge is a specific featured inclusion in the St. Catherine section of the atlas. Flatbridge is located along the Bogwart Gorge. The Bogwart Gorge is cut by the Lyew-Ayee River, flowing south from St. Catherine into Hunts Bay, Kingston Harbour. What has happened is that the gorge itself is prone to flooding episodes. That's not new. This is a type of natural, that is how the gorge was created. So when the juxtaposition of man and the environment, build a road through the gorge that was cut by water, it should come as no surprise.
That water takes it back. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are things that you know about Flatbridge, and you know how frequently Flatbridge floods. Another example in the book, in 1979, we had a massive flooding event in Newmarket, St. Elizabeth. People keep mentioning the 1979 floods. The atlas shows how many times Newmarket has flooded. Not just once, many different times. Same thing with Bogwart Gorge, same thing with many other countless nameless places in Jamaica. They flooded once, they flooded before, they will flood again. That is what the atlas is about. It's about laying out the framework. These things happen. Don't be surprised. None of the exclamations of how could this have happened. It's not that surprising. You just need to be prepared for it. And here's where we go back to the environment. This is where everything is going to play out no matter what. It then becomes a matter of engineering and economics as to what you do. Do you decide, can something be built to protect? And if it can be built, is it economical to build? You have two of the largest cities in the world, Mexico City and Tokyo, that are not only in earthquake-prone zones, but they're also beneath active volcanoes. It can happen. Not about
people are
packing up
living there and living there very well.
And 30-odd million people in each city living there. But it's about knowing what to prepare for. So the situation we have in Portmore, the situation we have in Jacks Hill, all these places, hazards will occur. It's how you prepare and mitigate against them. Not about looking back, navel gazing, how could this have happened? We know it can happen.
We know it can happen. And so as I go through the atlas, I keep feeling like I'd love to see a part 2. So I'm telling you what your next one should be.
So where there's another island of Jamaica somewhere?
No, one that now gives some advice, and I think maybe programs like this, the intention is to really take the information from the book and make it real life.
Yep.
Because it's still, even when I looked through, I was a bit surprised that you really just described the situation for Portmore, for example. But as someone, I mean, Portmore has grown significantly from where it started. And I think that there's a lot of information that people who currently own homes there, homes and businesses, and persons who want to own homes and businesses there, it's really important that they understand the kind of environment that they're operating in and what are the likely things that can happen to them as they go about.
And I take your point, and it's something that I've really never thought about, but I'm thinking about it right now. There is a very important need for people to understand what it is that they're buying into, and home ownership is the most important individual purchase a person can make in their lifetimes. Similarly with business investments and so on. You're talking about not just block and steel, you're talking about children and lives and futures and life savings and these things. To be laissez-faire about it is dangerous. You can lose your investments, you can lose your lives. But in a democracy, you also have a you also have a system that allows you to have a stake in your elected officials and your leadership. This is something that mayors, MPs, and voters alike have common access to, common information. There is no study that is exclusive to the mayor and to the politician or the political elite or the business elite that is a different ilk than what is available to the general public. This atlas is designed to be that level playing field. You have the same information available to both parties. And this is something that you can do. You can do it in the physical planning process. You can do it in the public consultation process. You can do this in your post-assessment process, your investment reviews, all of these things, same information, common information. This is where the information begins to get that more useful. The atlas, again, is really designed to be that general audience book. It's not designed to be so specific and exclusive to a certain type of audience. And that's where I feel that the Portmore resident, the Portmore mayor, the Portmore investor have common information.
So the atlas is for just about anybody who wants to learn more about natural hazards in Jamaica. I know for a fact that it's definitely has become very important to those of us in the general insurance industry. I think every company by now has a copy, and all those who are interested in studying insurance definitely has a copy. You know, we've seen, especially in Kingston, and I think maybe it's true of even a lot of our other parishes, where there's a move from, there's a coastal living and there's the hill living. How do you, if you were to be evaluating the opportunity to be next to the coast versus living high on the hills where you can see the coast, how would you make that evaluation for yourself based on all that you're now aware of from your study in order to be able to put together the atlas?
It is one of those things, again, my mentor and co-author, Rafi Ahmad, explained very early on in my student career the different landscapes that exist in Jamaica. You do have the coastal areas, you do have the hills, but you do have two different types of hills in Jamaica. You have the limestone, hilly uplands, so the Mandeville areas and so on. And then you have the non-limestone hilly uplands, so areas in Jacks Hill or Mavis Bank, and those areas are not quite the same as Mandeville. But you do also have river valleys, Gordon Town areas and those places that are along river valleys. And you also have plains, so Maypen, Spanish Town, those guys are on floodplains. Each of them have been created by natural processes, and as a result, the different kind of situations and hazards that can visit upon these places are different. We need to be aware of that. Again, that's part of how the first section of the atlas was framed. You want to be able to talk about those different types of landscapes and what could happen. Now, the desirability of a view in the hills and the desirability of your seaside villa, all of which have led to different levels of development in these in coastal areas or hilly areas, and the consequential premium that people would put on those locations. So these buildings and settlements and all different kinds of features have been popping up in these areas. But the reality is that you cannot have a seaside villa on the hill, nor can you have a house overlooking Kingston on the sea. So you have to have different types of adjustments to expectations and those things. And the same thing should happen in your engineering. So once you decide to develop something by the sea, you should know what your risks are. Once you know what your risks are, you should also know what your profile and the history of that particular place is. Has this area flooded before? Does this area have a history of flooding? What do I need to do? Okay, I'm going to build something by the sea. And you have many structures that are built by the sea. Ports, for example, have to be by the sea. These things are designed in a certain way to withstand the effects of not just storm surge and those types of flooding, coastal flooding, but you also have natural coastal erosion, deposition and erosion occurring along the coast. That's what's happening. This is natural processes. So as a result, you have to make sure that you don't obstruct things like put a groin in the middle of a natural active erosion area or whatever. You need to know this information. This is what the atlas is trying to put out. You're not operating in ignorance. It's not a one-size-fits-all approval process. It's something that, again, everything has to be put into context, and that's what the atlas is trying to do here.
So we can take it that everyone in our town planning offices have a copy of this, so that they can be approving based on the appropriate knowledge and information.
The key thing here is that really no one has an excuse anymore not to know.
Right.
So if the objective of something like this this morning, if the objective of our efforts as a university, and my mentor Rafi Ahmad and his efforts over 30 years of teaching to bear any fruit. This is what this atlas is about. This is about bringing together, I can't emphasize this enough. As a student, with Rafi Ahmad as my teacher, and I've seen him since then at conferences. I've seen him with the Prime Minister. I've seen him with different members of Parliament, international fora, and so on. The electricity and the energy he brings to the discussion. He is not lording down from above. He is very engaging. The problem is, and this was early on in the conceptualization of the atlas, how do you bottle that as a legacy? And that's what this is about. So no one really should have the excuse of not knowing this thing. So we would do a road show and tell people, and then people will forget by dinner time. This is black and white, or at least in color, in hard copy. You can't really get away now.
And black and white. And one of the nicest atlas I can say that there is, because there is all the information that's so useful, but the use of the photos, etc., really just, brings right in front of you what the situation is that you have to deal with. And so that makes it really interesting. So really, congratulations.
Thank you.
Really a wonderful job.
One of the inspiration is really the coffee table book that you'd see. And many times you'd get the Ray Chen style photo books of Jamaica or some Jamaica Tourist Board magazine and so on. Someone from the diplomatic corps told me that this is a hell of a book to scare away people from Jamaica, and that's not actually the case. The reality is that the general public, both here and overseas, investors in particular, are not idiots. They don't need to see some sugar-coated, candy-colored version of Jamaica that you want.
I mean, that's available if they want that as well. So.
To put the combination of pretty pictures and devastating pictures together, this is the reality.
Yeah.
When disasters strike, that's what they look like.
Beautiful things.
Exactly. And if you look at some of those pictures, Elizabeth, you'll note that you have amidst all the mangled zinc and despair, you see some pretty nice blue skies.
And
that
the greenery that forms the backdrop.
That's the nature of the beast.
That reminds us,
You do have a hurricane on a Monday and blue skies on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
You do have blue skies while the buildings are falling down. Right? There is not necessarily the total apocalyptic scenario. And then after the shaking and after the winds has blown, life goes on. And we need to be able to capture the life going on in the aftermath. We need to be able to show that after the aftermath, it goes back to normal. But the key thing here is to learn from the events themselves, to make sure that we don't just put up back the fallen zinc and the way it was before. Learn. Make it stronger. Do it differently. Turn the building a different way or align it differently. Don't put that tree there. Put another. These are lessons that you learn. Yeah. So you don't continue the mistakes going forward.
And that's why I'd still say, Parris, that I think the part 2 of this is working with people in the construction industry and have them really give some tips now. So if you're really in love with Caribbean Terrace and for whatever reason you're tied there because your legacy lies there and you really want to live there, here's what you should do if you expect to be able to live there and at least have a house standing after a storm surge. You know, because storm surges are going to come and we can't stop them, but how do we ensure that we live? And that's what, you know, it's really good to know that there are resources like this where all people can be aware of what it is that we face. Because I think risks are around us. I mean, just getting up and getting into your car and moving about, there's a risk of that. Yeah. But the important thing is knowing what the risks are. That's how the car is built to help you so that, you know, you don't get into an accident, or if you get in an accident, certain things don't happen. You know, you take certain precautions, you wear your seatbelt, etc. It's pretty much the same thing. This is now knowing about that for your construction purposes, for your home, which is so important to you.
Absolutely, and I think that's the nature of how general insurance operates. Is the risks exist. Is how do you manage them? How do you mitigate them? How do you plan for them? At the same time, you have to deal with the inevitabilities. But you also have to provide the type of assurance. You also have to provide a type of responsible assurance. You also have to give them the facts, and that's what this is about. This isn't about scaremongering. I don't think anyone can say that this is just designed to frighten people. These are the realities that exist around you, though. So anybody who just gets scared for the sake of getting scared and not doing anything about it is a dummy. And we're going to need to be able to do something about it. This is not science fiction or Halloween hijinks. This is real, and they need to learn from that. And to be fair, people have. People never knew that all of these things could happen. Fine. A very, very common thing in Jamaica in terms of proximity is the gullies. Now, living near a gully is a bad thing on paper, but is it?
There's some very nice uptown communities that are on the gully bank.
On the gully banks. And there are also a lot, the engineering of these uptown, well, at least let's just say some uptown communities or some uptown buildings along gully banks are designed better than others. Certainly better than most of the typical picture that you see of a house on a gully bank is not an uptown Uptown residents. These buildings are designed and built differently. That's the reality. So you have to understand those types of realities. Let's just assume that some of the Uptown well-built houses along gully banks also have approvals to do so. So again, there are different shades of gray that exist within the spectrum of building approvals, and this is a function of the shades of gray that exists in the reality of nature. So a one-size-fits-all solution is not, it's unnatural, because that's not how nature is, and to act in a single broad brush fashion is not the solution. And to be fair, we have seen that type of effect. I call that the Rafi legacy, because that is where, when I started this, my professional career 10 years ago, I do not recall having this type of awareness out there. Right now, the level of, I mean, mind you, it did coincide with Ivan 10 years ago as well, but we did learn our lessons. Gilbert really woke a lot of us up. Realized that between Gilbert and Ivan were a good couple of years, but since Ivan we've had Dean, we've had Gustav, we've had Sandy, in this last 10 years. And you, Elizabeth, can look at your own, the last 10 years and realize that it wasn't as bad as after Gilbert each time.
Yep.
And we've definitely learned our lessons. A lot of times you have a lot of noisemakers making a lot of noise. So these are the minority. The reality is that within a few days, it's almost back to normal for the majority of Jamaicans, and it's a product of information that's out there.
Climate change. Talk to me about climate change in the context of what you've covered in the Atlas.
Climate change is a reality. It's an ongoing, continuous process that's going to affect everything except for earthquakes. You're going to get more frequent, stronger hurricanes or periods of no hurricanes or so on. Same thing with drought, same thing with floods, same thing with landslides and so on. You're going to have extreme weather. That's what climate change is about. Climate change is more than sea level rise, but sea level rise is an obvious impact of climate change on a small island developing state that is Jamaica. The reality is that even if we stop everything now, the climate change effects are going to persist. You also have to realize that small island developing states feel the effect of climate change the most. But you know, you have the big countries like the US, China, India, whatever. They have their own issues as net contributors to greenhouse gases and so on. But the reality is that we need to be prepared. We need to understand that there are different measures that need to be taken in terms of adaptation and mitigation strategies. We need to start thinking about these things. Now, we cannot have a reactive stance of how could this happen, what are we going to do now, and we need to blame the government for that. It's pointless. It's really, those are the things that are just flying in the face of science, as well as ignoring a reality, a practical reality that's affecting lives and affecting your budget. If it's not one, it's another for those people. For decision makers, if it's not human lives, it's going to be your bottom line.
Right.
And then you're going to need to be able to adjust for that. For better or for worse, people have come around to the fact that this is a reality. You have an entire portfolio of a ministry dedicated to climate change. So from a policy standpoint, these things are happening. But we also have to understand that from a policy only, policy first, isn't necessarily the way to go. Sometimes the market drives demand. Sometimes common sense drives demand. Education is what's driving the market and the knowledge and the information that people have. So from a context of climate change is not a distant, abstract thing. Everything that you see in this atlas, except for earthquakes, you can project the climate change, either making things worse.
Making things worse.
But where you can expect the impact of climate change to be acutely felt in different areas in Jamaica. Coastal flooding, regular flooding, landslides, hurricane impact, all those things.
So that's all the more reason that we should all be ensuring that we have a copy of the Atlas,
Yep.
so that we can be aware of where the environment in which we currently live, the environment that we're daydreaming about having the house of our dreams in,
Precisely.
and just being sure that we're taking the requisite action.
We must remember the time scales that climate change is talking about, and then we talk about Vision 2030. We just have to look. That's 15 years from now.
Yeah, and it sounds far when you call the number,
Yeah.
but it happens so much faster in
Absolutely.
real life. I think that's the missing element when I listen to the conversation about climate change. I think using the Vision 2030 just makes it seem so
Distant,
far-fetched,
yeah.
when in fact time is going by so quickly. Who would have told us right now we'd be in 2050? We're pretty much in 2015.
Exactly.
You know,
But
so-
when you look at 15 years from now, 15 years back, that is your sense of what can be done in 15 years.
Right.
And again, 15 years ago was pre-Ivan, was different. Think about the leaps in telecommunications and digital 15 years ago, and what can be done in 15 years. This is something that we have to look and project. In other words, there is no need for the as is, as right now to be our future. Climate change is happening. It doesn't mean that what we have now is what are the tools that we're going to have then. But, you know, crawl before you can walk. The worst thing you can do is stay still and pout. Start crawling. And that's what we need to be doing. Don't project the future if you can't project yourself into that future. And many of you guys watching, school age or so on, younger than me, you guys have a lot more to live for than we do.
Yes, certainly. But you know, I'm curious. When you were going through the research for the Atlas, was there anything that absolutely shocked you? Was there a oh my gosh moment?
Again, this is a product of good teaching from my co-author Rafi. There's nothing here that surprised. Listen, he's been doing this for 30 odd years in Jamaica. He knows. He can pretty much pick up a rock and say, this came from St. Mary. I don't know these things. And what he did was he laid out the framework. If something surprised us in this atlas, then we didn't do our jobs and we don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
But the reality, though, is that we didn't leave this at the hazard point of view. We started to look at how many buildings would be affected. We took a look at some of the similarities. It's not in the atlas, but there are pictures of Michael College after the 1907 earthquake. And there are a lot of similarities to what happened in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, the pancaking of the main buildings and so on. Very similar to what we saw in Haiti. And again, not did nothing in the atlas surprise us. Nothing in Haiti surprised us either. Because this is the reality. If in an earthquake something started to fall up, that would surprise us. If the hurricane wind started to go in a different direction and started blowing, that would surprise us.
Right.
But these are the laws of nature.
Right.
It shouldn't surprise anybody. And that's the reality, and that's where we're aiming it. It's not going to surprise anybody, you know.
And certainly by making the information available, then none of us can say, one, we didn't know, or two, that we're surprised when things happen. And I think information is power. And so thank you very much on behalf of all of us who will find this information useful. And I hope, you know, all of our youngsters who are watching and who will become familiar with the material over time will certainly pass it on. And I certainly look forward to talking to you more on other occasions, to having the pleasure of meeting your co-author and your mentor as well, and you know, seeing some of that legacy. But also definitely looking forward to Atlas number 2.
Yes. 2.0.
which will see you, you know, even helping us to be able to use the information better. Thank you very much, and it's always good
Thank you.
talking with you.
Thank you.